Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kieran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there.
Damo!
Matt, how you doing?
Great, mate. How are you?
I'm super.
Of course you are. You look super, mate. You played super last night at the jam night at the old the Farmers. It was a cracking night. It was very loud night. It got very loud at the end, a little bit painfully loud, but it's that's how music should be. Music should be loud, shouldn't it?
Yeah, but not painful.
Well, that's my fault. I should have brought some, you stand right next to the drummer with 3 other guitarists on stage all at full volume. Well, I mean, I should have some hearing protection, really. We should talk about hearing protection.
Yes, definitely. And you were right next to the front of house PA speaker as well, so you were getting everything.
Yeah, I felt there was a moment at the end of the last song where I felt a little bit kind of trapped by sound. I was captured by the audio in a trap.
Yeah,
it was a good fun night.
Oh yeah, and I only managed. I tried to video. You did a solo. Do you know? I think it was classically over "Rocking All Over the World," and I started hearing it. And I thought, "Wow, this is so." And I only caught the end of it. I'll have to play it to you because it sounded so good. Your tone. It was absolutely spot on.
Yeah,
and I caught the end of it.
I'm enjoying my tone these days. I was thinking last night, I was like, this is the first time in years where I've really felt comfortable with my tone, and I think it's I've spent a good while now being such a what's the word I'm looking for? Such a kind of I don't know what the word is. I sing the song of the helix and the digital amp modeling. I've always been talking about how great that part of the world is for guitarists, being able to play through digital modeling. And I still think it's fantastic. But man, the last, few jam nights I've done where I've just brought my amp and plugged straight into the amp. And that Line 6 Catalyst amp I have sounds fantastic. I've basically got it set up so that it's, what I like to do is have it so that it's a good basic lead tone, not overly compressed, more like a crunch tone, but a volume that's got the volume and the headroom in there to cut through, and then just use the guitar's volume for the whole night, just to go between clean, crunch, and lead. And it does have a boost setting on the like channel switch pedal, so if I do want something more compressed, I can bring that in, but it's not a volume thing. But that freedom to kind of just go, whatever sound I need is available to me through the volume on the guitar. It just feels so liberating, actually. And I really like playing like that. I really like kind of feeling it a little bit more through the guitar rather than necessarily always just having a pedal to stamp on. But yeah, I'm really enjoying my tone. Although I'm not enjoying that. I need to get that Epiphone SG sorted out because I love playing the guitar. I love the way it feels in my hands, but I just can't get the intonation right on it. It's got a compensated wrap over bridge. There's no saddles on it that I can adjust backwards and forwards for the intonation. So the intonation on it's this constant compromise from string to string because you can only really turn the angle of the wrap over. And last night again, I just felt the whole time I was constantly listening at how slightly out of tune it was, and then I'm checking the tuning on the guitar, and with the open strings it's perfectly in tune, and then as soon as I play something other than open strings it feels I'm slightly sharp there, everything sounds slightly out. So I need to think about how to solve that, whether that's getting a new wrap over bridge for it that has adjustable sections on it. There are some out there. I have looked into it, so it's too nice a guitar in my hands to kind of write off. But I don't think I'm going to play it again at a jam night until I can get that intonation sorted out on it. Maybe it just needs to go to a good technician.
So I have a question.
Okay.
is that an intonation issue, or is it that you have now tuned your ears so well that you are not hearing? Oh my God, I'm going into realms of things I don't really understand. So you've got different types of tunings. You have various temperaments about how notes are tuned. They are tuned to your ear, or they are tuned to a frequency. So technically a note, so the note A, concert pitch A, is 440 hertz, and therefore the octave above that is whatever 880. The physics.
It's always double. Yes. An octave is always double in frequency. And
therefore you then have the other sort of the third and fifth, and they are specific frequencies. But that is a true temperament and tempered temperament. And I might be tempered temperament. No, that's something
tempered temperament. Didn't he produce the first Van Halen albums? No, it's Ted Templeman. Sorry. I see what you're saying.
So is it that you are hearing the out of tuneness just because those frequencies to you are out of tune? Whether they are you're hearing one or the other, and are you
saying that it's potentially a perception issue rather than an actual
possibly because you are issue. So forgive the word, so tuned to what it should be, that your guitar, if you measured it with instruments, measuring instruments, it would be absolutely on point, but your ears are telling you something different. Isn't there a Van Halen story?
It could be that. I really hope it isn't, because I can fix a guitar.
Well, I don't know.
Fix my ears, but it's a good
Isn't
point.
There that Van Halen? There's a Van Halen story about
Van Halen thing. Yeah, so he tuned, like, some of his riffs didn't sound quite in tune when his guitar was properly in tune. Like Running with the Devil was one of them.
That's the one. Yeah, that's right.
He would tune his, I think the B and the G string would be slightly sharp to get the third sounding right in the riff. But I think that's more of a guitar issue. And actually, I think also it's a music issue. Jacob Collier's talked about this on a podcast before about how thirds are, on a piano, they're not actually properly in tune. They're actually tuned by to sound correct, but an actual third is usually actually slightly flat than what it actually is on a piano. So like a major third is not quite right. So maybe there is a bit of that demo. I need to do some experimenting. But the hilarious thing about this conversation is that just before we started, we spoke about what we were going to talk about. And the first thing we talked about was not on that list.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of this, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely something I need to look into. But Damo, this is go on. Sorry, go on. You were going to say what?
No. We'll carry on with this.
All right, okay.
No, let's crack on with the actual things.
Yeah, because we haven't actually chatted since. This is the first one we've done this year. We've planned a few, and then things have got in the way, as they do. We're busy people, right? But this is the first one we've done. So what have we been up to? What have we been up to since?
Well, hang on, look. Excuse the fact that I am unzipping my hoodie.
Damo's just taking his hoodie off and revealing, what is that? It's a t-shirt that says Toto. Where did you get that Toto t-shirt, Damo?
Well, funny story. My wife bought it for me for Valentine's, apparently.
Oh, that's really nice of her.
I was in the queue at this, it was a Toto gig, in fact, yeah.
Seriously?
I know.
Yeah, because I was there with you, actually.
You were standing behind me.
Yeah. I was there.
So I merched up straight away, t-shirt and hoodie, and small mortgage for both of those things.
Feb, Wembley Arena.
It was phenomenal. You go first. Go on. Your thoughts about seeing Toto.
It was such a emotional roller coaster, as they say up in Newcastle. Genuinely, and in the sense of just the absolute thrill and euphoria to know that this is Toto we were seeing, in as much of an original form as you can these days. Obviously, not all, some of the original members aren't with us anymore, but you've got Joseph Williams singing. He was the singer throughout part of the 80s, wasn't he? And we've got Lukather on guitar. But then, there was this moment I was saying last night, actually, there was this moment in the middle of the gig where I was like, holy crap, that's Greg Fillinganes on keyboards. And I'm like, Greg Fillinganes? You know, I mean, take a moment. If you're listening to this and you don't know who the hell I'm talking about, pause this podcast and go and Google Greg Fillinganes? I might leave that in because it's funny. Go and Google Greg Fillinganes and just look at his output. You know, he's the guy who played the stuff Stevie Wonder couldn't play on Songs in the Key of Life. You know, he's all over Michael Jackson's Bad, Thriller, everything throughout the 80s, Clapton's 24 Nights, you know, so much stuff throughout the 80s. He's basically like, he's the Steve Lukather of the keyboard in a way, isn't he?
Oh, he's amazing, yeah.
And so there was this moment where I was like, this is a serious hero, and what getting the pleasure to see play. But the other thing was the sadness when it ended, where I was kind of like, will they come to the UK again? You know, these guys are getting on. Will they tour the UK? Will I get the chance to see this again? Damo, the other thing as well was just the sound. It was like listening to a record, you know.
Yes.
It was so perfect.
I noticed this, especially for, I think it was Pamela, the song Pamela. And I shut my eyes and I thought, wow, the sound is, and I love doing sound and live sound and studio sound, and it was amazing. I mean, everything was clear and it wasn't loud.
No, it wasn't, was it? Actually, that's a really good point. There was a point at the beginning of the gig where I was like, could be a couple of dB louder, actually. But it was still very, I mean, clarity over volume clearly was the tactic.
It was absolutely phenomenal. The only other time I've ever experienced sound like that in a big venue, I went and saw Elton John in a stadium in Paris years and years and years ago, and I could not believe the sound quality of a stadium gig. And I thought everything was, I just couldn't understand how they did that. And the Toto sound was that as well.
Yeah.
It was absolutely phenomenal.
And then, you know, on top of all that, you've got Steve Lukather, who I don't understand how somebody can get to almost 70 years old and still have every single chop in the bag, every single trick, every single lick. If anything, I think he's quite possibly a better guitar player now than he ever was. I mean, don't you think it's just astonishing to me that there wasn't a single moment in the night where I felt like he repeated himself or ran out of ideas or, you know, nothing ever felt cliched what he was playing. It's just, he's got so much in the bag. It's terrifying, actually, how underrated he is. You never hear him in conversations when you hear people talking about, oh, who's the best guitarist around, you know, who's most impactful, you know, whatever it is. When people talk about shredders, he's never in the conversation. When people talk about just rock guitarists, he never seems to be really in the conversation. But I mean, he deserves to be up there. And I know it's almost a running joke on this podcast now talking about Steve Lukather. I mean, it is a running joke, you know, because it's beyond acceptable to me that, you know, he isn't revered more than he is. Because I mean, and the gig proved it to me. It was just so good. It was so good.
It was, yeah, ridiculous. And I think his age has got something to do with it, and the fact that when he was in his 20s doing all the session stuff, he was trying to impress everybody, everyone in the room, everyone on the record.
Yeah. And
it stuck out and it worked really well. But now he's got, you know, ultimate maturity on the guitar and knows exactly what to do when, and still being highly creative with it.
Yeah.
His guitar playing, being completely and utterly musical. And I think that's the thing that he is underrated for. He's just a musician. He's an amazing musician that just happens to be awesome on guitar, if you see what I mean. He's a musician
right.
first.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
It's like Greg Fillinganes. He's 100% an amazing musician that is just a phenomenal technician on the piano.
Yeah.
And a vocalist. Oh my God, his vocals are
ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've followed Greg Fillinganes, same, you know, well, since my teens when I first came across him playing on Clapton stuff, from the Journeyman album to all the 24 Night stuff, and him and Nathan East. Nathan East still plays with Clapton on the bass. We'll come back to bass players later, but Nathan East is a hero of mine.
Yeah,
just for being an amazing, amazing musician that plays that instrument.
Yeah, exactly. there was an interview on YouTube last year. It was Steve Porcaro and David Page were doing an interview in like Sun Studios or something. I can't remember. In LA.
Yes, Sunset
Studios. Yeah. That's the one. Yes, and they asked them about Lukather, and Steve Porcaro said this wonderful thing about him. He said,
"Sorry to interrupt this conversation. However, if you're a regular listener, then do us a favour. Share us with your friends. Spread the word. Help us to grow. And remember to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcasts." Let's get back to the show.
Whenever they were writing, Steve Porcaro always it took him time to find like his keyboard part in the recording. And then he said you would go, the album would come out and you would go on tour, and that keyboard part that he'd written, after say maybe 3 months of being on tour, he would have that keyboard part developed into something that was perfect. Like he'd be like, right, this is it. This is what I should have played on the record. And he said Steve Lukather would get there in the first take. What was a 3 to 6 month process for Steve Porcaro, who was one of the most prolific session keys players of the 80s, was a momentary process for Steve. Steve could get to the most perfect part for a song in the first take, as if it was nothing. And that speaks to your point about him being a musical person, a musician first, above just being a guitar player. He could hear what the music needed immediately,
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that whole gig, everything was just an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Just phenomenal. So yeah. I will go again whenever I can.
Yeah.
So I first saw them in 2001.
Okay.
At the Shepherd's Bush Empire when they were touring. They had just brought out a covers album. The covers album.
Yeah. Okay.
Through the Looking Glass.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, hence the While My Guitar Gently Weeps cover that they do. And that sort of lasted, but that's the only one they ever do. But they did an amazing version of Sunshine of Your Love. I don't know if you've heard that.
I need to check that one out.
Yeah, of course. I think it's in 7.
Really?
7/8, and 6/8 and 4/4. Yeah, it's a phenomenal version.
Why not, eh?
Yeah, and they hint at White Room in it as well. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And they do an Elton John song. They do a Elvis Costello.
Really?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And they do a Herbie Hancock. The album is. They Toto'd all of these songs and made them their own songs. They Toto'd them. Yeah,
that's
absolutely
amazing. Need to check them out.
It's a great album. But that's when I first saw them and got completely hooked. And the live album was live at Amsterdam.
That's a great one.
That's that tour.
Yeah, that
I saw, and I was then hooked as a person that needed to go and see them regularly. But this was a standout gig for them.
Oh yeah, well. What a privilege, eh? What a privilege to see him. Another thing, mate, that's happened since we last spoke is I had the privilege of, through work, because I work for my day job, I work for an American company, and once or twice a year we go out to the US for kind of like company get-togethers, conferences and things like that. This year, back in January, we went out to Austin in Texas, which, besides being one of the worst traveling experiences I've ever had in my life.
Oh God!
It was a pleasure being in Austin. Obviously, the first day I was there before our conference started, I had a walk down to the riverside and went to see Stevie Ray Vaughan's statue. I had my little earpods in. I was listening to Pride and Joy. Took a few pictures. It was quite a moment. I really enjoyed it. It's a beautiful statue. It was a beautiful day. I think I stuck a picture up on Facebook when I did. But yeah, that was really nice. And actually, the music scene in Austin was great because in the nights when after the working in the day and stuff like that, if we'd go out for dinner and a few drinks, then where we were in Austin was right on like 5th and 6th Avenue where the bars are and stuff. And there was a lot of live music on. And we walked into one bar and there was a 3-piece blues band playing Texas Flood when we walked in. and the guy on guitar might as well have been Stevie Ray Vaughan. I just kind of thought, this is ridiculous. Why can't there be more like this at home? Why can't I just walk into a bar and somebody's playing Texas Flood every time I want to go for a beer or something like that? But that was a really nice experience to go out and see Austin. We were staying in this hotel that was directly opposite Anton's as well, which I'm told, I think it was Jerry on the Guitar Geek Hangout mentioned, or it might have been Tim, I'm not certain, but it's not the original Anton's, where Stevie Ray Vaughan and Doyle Bramall, the Archangels, those guys, they would have started out, but it's still owned by the same people. It's just a new venue. But yeah, it was a really great trip, man. If you ever get the chance to go to Austin, go, but don't have a terrible journey like I had. It was pretty rough.
Maybe you talk about that another time. That sounds awful.
Well, we were delayed so much on the tarmac that we had our in-flight meal before we'd even left the gate. That's how long we were waiting for. And then we had a 10-hour flight to Dallas and a changeover to Austin. And it was a long day. Very long day. But,
wow. Okay. Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun. Doesn't sound like fun at all.
No, but it was worth it. It was worth it.
Yeah.
But there we go, man. That's what I've been up to.
Stevie Ray, you've stood next to his statue. That's as close as you're going to get, really.
It is. Yeah. It's in a really nice setting as well. Just off the Colorado River, you walk out of the city, you head downtown, you cross over the Colorado River and take a right into the park where there's this event center there, and it's a beautiful big open area park where people running around and ice cream trucks and stuff like that, and places to sit, and people throwing balls for their dogs and stuff like that. It's just a beautiful little park. And then just by the river, partway along the path, is his statue overlooking the river. It was great, really nice. I'm glad that it was a nice day that I went as well. It was sunny, it was really warm, and I'm like, this is late January, back in the UK, everything's frozen. I'm able to walk around in a t-shirt.
I remember getting your picture of you and Stevie. Stevie and Matt, Stevie Ray and Matt Oliver. What a privilege.
What a privilege. Yeah. So anyway, What did we want to talk about today, Damo?
Well, let's start off with, I'm going to mention John Mayer.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And his signature set of strings.
Yeah. Have you tried them out yet?
No.
No, neither have I.
No, I'm not going to.
But that's not what we're talking about. It's not a string review, is it?
It's not a string review. No. It's about strings themselves.
Mm.
And I've talked a lot about to other guitarists. So our lovely listeners, Mr. David Bartlett on Blue Hair and Bass, but awesome guitarist. He likes his specific set of string make, and I think he's gone, is it Elixir?
Ah, okay, yeah. Elixir ones, the coated ones.
Elixir, yeah. And Mr. Matthew Lake, he will also veer towards those for longevity and, great strings. And talk about, the different coatings and then string gauges, hence the John Mayer 10.5 set. I haven't come across a 0.5 set. He obviously just needs that little bit. He wants to be half a millimeter more tension than Clapton uses.
Yeah.
To get that little bit more tone.
He wants something between Stevie Ray and Clapton, doesn't he?
Well, yeah. So there's that. But my thoughts are, after chatting with another listener, that in isolation, strings are definitely a part of the chain of a guitar's sound.
Oh, for sure.
But it's a massive, massive, massive chain. Only affects one part of it. I don't know. It's like maybe like putting super unleaded in a 20-year-old Nissan Micra.
Yeah.
It depends on what it is. If you're
exactly.
The correct fuel in a Bugatti Veyron, that's really important.
Yeah.
Whether you use, power it with AA batteries. I don't know.
Yeah. It's that.
I don't know anything about cars. I'm sorry.
It's that principle, though, isn't it, of kind of the accumulation of small improvements throughout a system. That was the system that basically took British cycling to the Olympic gold success. Was rather than trying to just be better, it was just trying to improve everything. And I think if you think about it that way, strings are really important in that, if you have something that's just slightly better than the last thing before, then you're accumulating throughout your chain of those different things, what will add up in the end to be quite a big improvement. But for me, I'm quite, I'm not overly bothered by guitar strings. I just want something that feels good. I'm not really bothered about longevity. I don't really get the elixir thing. I don't get it because that coating is really there to reduce, corrosion and to, like you say, extend longevity. But you can't extend the longevity of your strings past the point where they stretch out of intonation. So there's still a ceiling that those strings can last by. And for me, I being the frugal northerner that I am, I like buying a 3 set of roto sounds for the same price as a single set of elixirs, because those 3 sets of roto sounds will last longer than 1 set of elixirs. And I actually really like the sound of the roto sound strings. I really do. And the other strings I like, because on my Strats, what I'll do on the Strats, because I don't really like a really trebly bridge pickup on the Strats. One of the things I've never really liked. One of the things I found during the pandemic when I was experimenting with strings was that if you buy pure nickel strings instead of nickel wound steel strings, the pure nickel strings have got a darker sound and they take a lot of top end out of your signal. So it's kind of like if you need to EQ a Strat that you've got that's a bit bright, get some pure nickel strings. So those are the only 2 things I've ever really considered, really, Damo, is how strings just kind of feel from a gauge perspective and whether or not they can contribute to the tone. But I know there's more to it than that.
Well, so just going back to Mr. John Mayer, for an example, it's not necessarily about him. He is, forget about wealth, but he is able to have the rig he wishes. So from the guitar's point of view, he has an amazing Silver Sky.
Yeah.
Top quality cables going into his amp, which is probably some sort of 2-rock/Dumble, all hand wired for him. And everything going in between that guitar to the amplifier, including the actual speaker driver in the amp, will be highly thought out by him and his tech crew, maybe his guitar tech. So every part of that chain is thought out. So if you do adjust one thing, you will notice. So his rig will be tried and tested for him, with him, and if there's something, as you say, so if he thought, well, why is my guitar still sounding a little bit toppy? I want to change the strings, exactly as you said. But if you've got this thing and you're a working, gigging, famous rock and roll star, gigging musician, and you're using the same thing week in, month, or for a whole tour, then you are able to pinpoint what it is that you would like to change.
Yeah.
Within that, from string, pickup, wiring, jack socket, cable length, wireless, wired, into the amp, the gain on the amp, everything, even down to the microphone that's picking up the sound of the amp, and maybe the preamps on the mixer. Every subtle thing can alter the sound. And I know Matt Lake struggles with the fact that he will set up his guitar sound using his quad cortex. But even when we used to mic up amps, he would be really happy with the sound of his amp, but put it into a gig in a different venue, it changes. And that's his frustration. But that can even come down to if you're using in-ear monitors, the type of in-ear monitors you're using. So the chain just keeps going. And obviously where you're standing. So obviously we have to look at these famous, successful guitarists for, not inspiration is not the right word, for guidance on what us mere mortals will do from gig to gig. We don't get to do these massive venues week in, week out. We get to go and play in pubs or wedding venues, barns, marquees, depending on where you're going and playing, and you're trying to fix your sound where it sounds different in every venue to start off with. And then, you try and tweak one thing or another. And I'm not sure there is enough of a control scenario where you can say, I need to change the wiring on my bridge pickup because I can hear the fact that it does X.
Yeah.
I mean, just adjust on the night. You have to. It's a bit bright. I'll turn the tone down then. The treble down on the out. You adjust from what you hear on the night. I mean, and obviously, if that's just talking about pickups, I mean, you can go into X amount of detail, an enormous amount of detail, just for one aspect of your guitar sound, tone, experience.
Hey, don't forget as well that John Mayer is playing guitar with a new set of strings on every night as well.
Yes,
that's another thing because we all know. Put a new set of strings on your guitar. It feels like a new set of strings for 4 days, 3 days maybe, if you play every day. And then maybe, if you're playing every day, maybe a couple of weeks where we know they're okay. And then after that, really, they start to sound and feel like a dead set of strings. I've got a new set of strings on the Fernandez at the moment because I changed that. But I haven't played it much, really. If I pick it up now, it'll probably feel like new strings still. But after a few days of playing, that initial kind of zing will go. But John Mayer's he's got the zing every night because he's got a new set of strings on from his guitar tech. And that adds something as well. The age, of your guitar strings is a big factor.
Absolutely. So, we wouldn't. I use the Ernie Ball Super Slinky pink packet.
Yeah.
I've always liked that, and I've been consistent. Yeah. So all my guitars have. They're Super Slinky. Yeah. All my guitars have that, apart from the 335 Epiphone, which has a set of regular Slinkies on it.
Yeah.
And I know that is the string, and then that's consistent across all my guitars. And then I know, because I don't have a different amp for each of these guitars. I now have a Helix, obviously, so I could technically. But my playing experience is the same. And I know that if they get dull, I just change them. And they are reasonably priced that you can just go, I'll just, you buy a pack of 10 or whatever, and you just change them whenever you want to, really. And I'll try and change mine as regularly as possible. But it's kind of not about strings, this conversation, is it? It is about, and the one factor we try and change our tone, it's these. I'm wiggling my fingers.
Damo is wiggling his sausages right in front of the camera.
They are. That's exactly what my dad would call them, yeah. They are terrible sausages. He said, my dad often says to me, how the hell can you play the guitar with those things? All right, great, thanks.
But you're absolutely right, man. I mean, here's the thing, and I mentioned this in the text to you, didn't I? There's a great story, and I don't know where it originates from. It might be a Steve Lukather story. I don't know. But it was about Larry Carlton, and Larry Carlton was doing a gig somewhere. I don't know if it was some kind of clinic or whatever. And Larry Carlton's got an amazing setup, hasn't he? A kind of a, he's playing a late 50s 335, because he's Mr. 335. He's got his own Dumble amplifier, and then the way he does his effects is kind of like an old school way. He used to do his effects on stage like you would do your effects in a studio, which is kind of, he had a mixer on stage taking a microphone off the cab, and then that microphone signal would get mixed out into effects units, and then the effects would come out of some PA speakers next to his amp. So it's kind of, you're mixing effects in post signal afterwards in stereo, and they're all parallel effects. So really high kind of quality rig. And after the gig, after the gig, somebody apparently comes to Larry Carlton and says, "Hey man, that guitar and that rig sounds fantastic." And apparently the story is that Larry Carlton kind of turned to his rig and kind of said, "Really? I can't hear anything. Can you?" As if to make the point that it makes, obviously it doesn't sound like anything unless his fingers are on it. He is the person actuating and creating all those sounds. You can't. Maybe he makes a good argument that you can't objectively say that your rig sounds good if often by itself it makes no sound at all. It's got to have you. You are the first thing in the chain.
But that's a famous thing from Spinal Tap. Because listen to the sustain of this holding up the Les Paul. No, listen.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, well, you would if you were playing a note and, listen to the sustain on that. guitar. Yeah, it's just guitars don't have sustain because well, of course they do, but
I know what
you have to. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not there. It's not something that's there in the guitar, right? You know, it's everything that comes out of your instrument and everything that goes through every single chain in your rig. It begins with something that you start yourself with your mind and your fingers. So that's the thing people should work on the most. Surely, work on your touch, your feel, your musicality. Your tone will improve because of that. You could have a fairly simple, poor sounding rig, and if you spent a year really working on your touch, your time feel, your musicality, and understanding how to translate what you hear in your mind to your fingers. You know what I mean? Going like moving from that stage of conscious incompetence and onwards. Trying to get to that. Unconscious competence. If you kind of work on those things, plug into the same rig, you will sound better. You will absolutely sound better.
So I kind of have enjoyed the journey by, if I remember, when I first started to play guitar, I had a Marlin Strat copy, and it had like loads of like active electronics in it,
right?
Weird stuff. And I had an amplifier called Maine, M-A-I-N-E.
Okay.
And it had like chorus in it. It was a transistor amp.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand anything about sound or tone. So, I could get distortion and there was chorus on it and stuff. But I spent my time figuring out how to play the guitar.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean. And I didn't know that. I didn't make a conscious choice. But I thought, well, I want to sound like David Gilmour at the time. I only want, and I didn't. But in my head, I was copying his playing, not his tone. It didn't become about the tone. I wanted to know how he bent that first note in Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and how he did it in tune, adding vibrato with it, either with his fingers or he used the whammy. So the music came first for me. And I think I've only got into, guitar-y, nerdy stuff probably very recently. When I say recently, sort of last decade, maybe. I always wanted it, but I didn't really care enough about it. And obviously our good friend, the wonderful Mr. Kieran Amliwala, is, he has an extensive knowledge on tone and how guitars are built. He's built these things, and I always, hence him always looking after and fixing my guitars, because I didn't know, because I didn't overly care as much.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I just wanted to play the guitar. Yeah. That was what excited me, and through that, I wanted to get a great sound. And I would try various things. But because of our situations, that we are mere mortals, we don't get to play the sort of same size venues. We get to play in pubs where we don't get to hear ourselves very well, or it's too loud, or it's too quiet, or, the situations are never ideal for our type of guitar playing. And we've got to try and create a sound that we hear in our head, i.e. John Mayer, Clapton, Steve Vai, Steve Lukather, who have these, it's, and then, there are people that, I think the first guitar nerds were the ones that were Hank Marvin devotees that would try and recreate Hank Marvin's rig, because you could, and buy the most authentic copycat delay machines, and the authentic Fiesta Red Strat and whatever amp, I don't even know what amps he used or whatever, to try and recreate. And they always wondered why they would get close, but no cigar.
They didn't have Hank's hands.
Basically, yeah.
That's it. And his mind, I love the Shadows. Yeah. I love some of Hank's playing. Some of my favourite melodies of all time are, like Wonderful World and, Apache, and just some of those records were so beautifully recorded. But you're absolutely right, it's even something as simple as what Hank had, which was, Strat into a, like an Echoplex or whatever it was at the time. I can't remember what the tape, it was a tape-based echo unit, wasn't it, into a Vox AC30. You can go out and buy all those things and start playing the records. Are you really going to sound exactly like Hank? It's difficult because, we forget. I was just thinking now as you were talking, I can't remember when I started to feel like it was so important to consider my equipment, like my tone, like the pedal board and the amp and stuff. I can't remember when I that became so important to me, because I definitely remember only worrying about whether an amp was loud enough for a gig. And when I first started gigging, I didn't have a pedal board. I didn't even have a pedal. I would, if I had a 2-channel amp, then I'd use the second channel for a lead sound. If I didn't have because when I first started gigging with Roadrunner, I didn't even have my own amp. I had to borrow. I actually, for the audition for the band, I borrowed a Laney amp from Rory Harvey at the time. He had this Laney 2-channel valve amp, and I borrowed that for the audition, and then a couple of gigs, and then I gave it back. And then the lead singer in the band said, "Oh, I've got a mate who can lend you an amp for the next few gigs before," because I was going to go home at Christmas time. So it was like late in the year. I was going to go home to my mum and dad's at Christmas time, and I was picking up an amp from the guitar shop I used to work at up north. So I needed an amp to get through some gigs, and Andy from Roadrunner he got his mate to lend me an actual Vox AC30, like a vintage one. And that's what I was playing through at gigs. I had it pretty loud, loud enough for the gig. It was still clean. So then I had to get a drive pedal. So I just had a battery-powered drive pedal on the floor. I didn't know what it was. It just said overdrive on it. It was probably like a 20 quid, Argos catalogue. It's Behringer type thing. But I didn't care because my needs for the gig were serviced. I had a lead sound and I had a rhythm sound. And if I needed something crunchier, I could back off the volume on the lead sound. It was more about the songs and the music. Can I get through the songs and play what I want? Do I need to worry about having chorus and delay? But I tell you what, Damo, I can't tell you when. I don't know when I started worrying about all those other things. Is my pedal board wired up? Bro, I got the right power supply. Do I need to DI my sound through am I going through the effects loop? Honestly, I didn't give a shit about that stuff. And I'm kind of glad I don't now. I never really got it right. I could never get it right. It's just you've got to remove things that get in the way of you making music.
Yes.
Because those are the things, everything that's ever moved you in music that you've listened to in your life, the songs that have moved you, the things that, if I was to tell you now, ask you what song makes you want to play guitar, something's going to appear in your mind. It's going to be the music and the playing, and you're not going to suddenly go, oh yeah, the thing that moved me was, Clapton 24 Nights when he played through that Soldano head with that, Pete Cornish rack system. You're not going to say that. You're just going to talk about the music.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is maybe a slight deviation from this, but yesterday, friend of the show, Rob Skinner, asked a question to a few of us, asking how important is it to play Master of Puppets by Metallica all down strums like Mr. Hetfield does. And it's an interesting question. And he asked, would we know the difference? If he played it and recorded it, would we know what would be the difference? And I don't think, as seasoned guitarists, I don't think we would know the difference as a blind hearing test. A blind hearing test, but yeah, a blind hearing test. yeah. Because sorry, that blew my mind there. I didn't quite know what I was actually saying.
Blind hearing test, fantastic.
Blind hearing test.
Yeah.
But my point was to the group. Surely this is where music and performance overrides a technique or a piece of gear, or it's exactly what you just said about Clapton and you don't remember the Soldano head, you remember the fact that James Hetfield plays this all down strum, because when you look at him, he hasn't got the guitar strung up round his neck like George Formby and doing nice, neat jazz alternate picking. Yeah. No, he's got it low slung. He's doing it all down because it looks aggressive.
Yeah.
And it probably is aggressive, but technically and musically, the difference is subtle, very, very subtle. But to watch him do it, giving it everything in every down strum, it's really emphasizing the fact. And he'll be doing some sort of nasty face with his moustache, master.
Doing that terrifying scream.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about attitude, and that attitude comes across in the music. So if somebody were to say, well, listen to this, this is up, this is all downstrummed, this is up, you could notice a difference. And if you were trying to recreate on stage, I would say do all downstrums, but there probably isn't any difference apart from attitude towards the music. And this is what I feel is the most important thing. Attitude towards the music is paramount.
It absolutely is, yeah. And in fact, I would say, here's a thought, right? If you're somebody who's maybe somewhat disenchanted with your tone, struggling to feel like you can sound good, struggling to feel like you can, get the sound you want, or you're feeling, disconnected from what you're playing, or you feel kind of demotivated for whatever reason, maybe that's the thing that you're missing. And it's not something to do with your rig, your sound, your guitar, or, whatever it is, music you're listening to, feeling uninspired. Maybe you just need to work on the connection between you and your instrument and the music itself, and try and, light that fire again and everything. And that's the beginning of the fuse. Everything else is the fuse, that's where you light it. That's what I would suggest,
I think so. I mean, the things that stick out in my mind, so there was that, going back to Mr. Lukather, and he was demonstrating, maybe was it Human Nature or something, his part on Human Nature, and it's just like a little poppy one note little riff, 2 or 3 notes, and it just stays there, and that was his part, and it's absolutely perfect. And,
it is, yeah.
And the chords are changing, but his little repeated riff ostinato is a repeated thing, so its context changes to do with the harmony. So we're getting into a sort of deeper, proper musical harmony, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that choice is nothing to do with the tone. It's maybe a little bit, but it was the note choice.
Yeah.
And also the other song, which I love to talk about, which is Holy Mother by Clapton. His guitar solo, he starts by just bending up to one note.
It's the major third, isn't it? He's bending up to the major third on that B.
And it just continues.
Yeah.
While the context of that note changes depending on what the chord's happening underneath. So he's just playing one note, but the chords underneath change the context of that note. And that's what I remember from the guitar solo. And then you think, well, I like the way it sounds as well, but does it sound right because of the tone, or does it sound right because he's chosen that note and the way he picks it, maybe just slightly before or after the beat? I think it's the musicality of that note and the way it is executed, or the way it's picked, the timing, and when he chooses to release that and move into some other bits and pieces in the scale, or the notes he's choosing to play that melody with. It's music. It's music over guitar strings, tone, pickups, amp. That's all of the fairy dust, the icing, all of those things. But without the actual fundamental music there, you can't polish a turd, can you?
Can't polish a turd. Basically, you're absolutely right. You've got to get rid of the turd. You've got to replace the turd with something non-turdish and go from there.
Wow.
Profound, right? But
very profound.
But the truth of it is, like, genuinely, I think there are some things that are important and become more important to you as you kind of get better. There's things you can't strip away. Maybe you're the kind of person who's got a really complex rig. Maybe you need to reconnect with that musicality side, like we just said. Simplify things. Do some practice where you just play the guitar, or you just plug into an amp and try doing musical things, not things that are related to how you sound. The strings are still there, aren't they? So strings really are important in that side of things. They are a fundamental part of what you do. You can take away your pedal boards, you can take away your effects and all kinds of other things, wireless systems and stuff. You can never take away the strings. So strings is important. Are you going to try the John Mayer strings out, do you think?
I will not be trying.
No, me neither.
A set of 10.5s. I don't need that in my life.
Yeah, I do wonder why they do that. Why? It's got to be. It's merchandise, isn't it? It's merchandise.
Completely marketing. I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously thought he's come to the conclusion that he needs a set of 10.5s or whatever each of the gauges are. for his playing, and they said, well, we can obviously monetize that.
I kind of feel like
because you're going to have a,
over the last 10 years, there's been enough people now buying Silver Skies that they're probably all getting to that point now where they go, I still don't sound like John Mayer. This is ridiculous. I bought the signature amp from 2 Rock. I've got all the pedals he uses. I've now got the guitar he uses, and I still don't sound like this is ridiculous. I'm gonna maybe I'll come to the realization soon that it's because I'm not John Mayer. And then all of a sudden his new strings come out and you go, oh, of course, I don't have his strings. That's why I don't sound like John Mayer. And now they can carry on down that path of wild kind of, nonsense where they don't realize that, you're just not John Mayer and you haven't had his life.
They'll be selling his DNA next to see if you can inject it into you to see if you can get some of his inspiration.
Oh, right. Like his stem cells. So they're going to be like John Mayer stem cells sold by, PRS or whatever. And you can start developing, massive hands and, some kind of ego and arrogance. Yeah, maybe. Suddenly start wearing expensive watches.
Different John Mayer arrogance. It's a fragrance, He would do that. He would do the advert.
He
wouldn't
probably
he? Surely
would.
I can almost
jokingly
picture it.
Yeah,
no, not jokingly.
Do you know that? He's good enough to have some arrogance. I think you can forgive him with that. I think he's more humble these days than he was. But I mean, the chap's getting on, isn't he?
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all, mate? Aren't we all? This podcast is getting on as well, actually. Let's wrap it up, shall we?
Yeah.
Plans for the week, dude? Are you gigging? Are you back into the gigging cycle now?
Yeah, definitely. So, this is going to be a good one, actually. So, I've been asked to fill a cancellation at a pub we gig at regularly. And in fact, my band, the DLB, are going to be there next Saturday.
Oh, cool.
So I've put a trio together with the wonderful Mr. Matt Lake on bass, which he's looking forward to. He doesn't get to play much bass at the moment, and drummer. And I'm attempting to do no DLB songs.
What?
So
you don't repeat yourself the week after, right?
So it will be a night of pulling out some Clapton, some Hendrix.
Yeah.
And it'll be a long jam night. It's just me playing all the stuff. I thought, let's do that.
You got to do
what
Badge.
That sounds like.
Do Badge. Badge is great.
Yeah, do Badge.
Cream,
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, we'll do Sunshine of Your Love and all that sort of stuff. And I don't care whether people enjoy it. I think they will, but it'll be good.
The spirit
really
demo.
I know.
Here he is, your entertainment guru, ladies and gentlemen, for all your weddings and events. You heard it here first. I don't care if people enjoy this.
I'm going to go and play some guitar.
Excellent.
But next week I shall do all of your entertainment needs at the said venue. So yes, I'm doing that at the weekend, which would be great. Yeah, but that's about it. Yeah, but it's going well.
That's awesome, man. It's nothing for me. I have nothing other than jam nights and noodling at home. But do you know what I am going to start? I'm going to start writing, I think. I'm going to start doing some writing, try and get some ideas together, recording some ideas and try and do some instrumental stuff, I like the idea of doing that. Challenge myself, to kind of come up with some interesting music. Now that I've got a bit more space and time to do it, not doing gigs and things. So that's what I'm going to do. But anyway,
good.
There we go. Demo.
Well, look, this has been amazing.
I love having you here, mate. It's great. Thank you for continuing to fill our brother's shoes whilst, he's doing great, isn't he? I know.
He is, yeah. Pleasure and an honour, as always.
Yeah.
Can I, just before we go, for next time, I wish to talk about the bass player, Jeff Berlin. Jeff Berlin,
you did mention that.
I know, I did. And this is not to bash Jeff Berlin. He's an amazing 70s prog fusion bassist who is a phenomenal player. But I'd like people to go and have a look at his social media because he raises and asks a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I would like to raise some of those questions here because I think they're worth talking about, whether you agree with him or not. I think he asks a lot of interesting things about music and playing and approach, which can be transferred to guitar as well. But, this is guitar smart, so bass guitar.
Bass. Absolutely. Bassists are important too.
I started as a bassist, so yes.
Yeah.
So yes, next time.
Fantastic. Let's do that. That goes on the agenda for next time. I'm going to do some research on Mr. Berlin.
Yes,
and
do it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that on the next one. But until then, Damo, thank you again so much. Pleasure to see you.
Cheers,
as always.
Yeah, and you too.
All the best, mate.
2 days in a row.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
lovely.
Exactly.
See you soon.
See you later, Damo.
Bye.
All the best, mate.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you hear, then why not give the rest of our shows a good listen too? And if you love our podcast and are a regular listener who wants to support the show even more, then consider buying us a coffee over on our Buy Me a Coffee page. Anyway, see you again next time on the Guitar Smarts podcast.